Welcome back to Secrets Exposed. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. You're the reason these stories worth sharing. Tell us where you're watching from, city or country. We're amazed by how far these tales reach. Subscribe our channel and press bell icon to get daily new and amazing stories for you. Alright, let's begin. The high school gym pulsed with restless energy. Paper flags taped along the bleachers fluttered every time the brass band burst into another patriotic riff. Dozens of hands gripped phones, screens already recording, everyone waiting for the moment that had been teased all week, the return of a local soldier. When the announcer's voice boomed through the microphone, "Please welcome Home Staff Sergeant Ethan Cole," the gym erupted. Students stomped their feet, parents clapped, and balloons bobbed above heads. Ethan stepped into the gym's entrance tunnel, his dress uniform pressed sharp, hat tucked neatly under one arm. His eyes didn't sweep the crowd, didn't search for applause or cameras. He looked for only one face, his son. And there he was, Liam, just 11, with his hoodie sleeves pulled down over his hands, eyes wide as he spotted his father. For a second he froze, like he didn't believe what he was seeing. Then, suddenly he bolted. The crowd melted into background noise as Liam sprinted across the court, sneakers squeaking against polished wood. He slammed into Ethan's chest with the kind of hug that almost knocked the air out of him. Ethan caught him, folding his arms around the boy in a practice motion, the way he had countless times when Liam was smaller. But this time, something was wrong. Liam stiffened at the embrace. Ethan loosened his grip immediately, his soldier's instincts reading the flinch the way others read headlines. As Liam's sleeve rode up, the crowd's cheers blurred. Across the boy's thin arm, bruises bloomed, yellow fading into purple, fingerprints etched into skin like ugly signatures. Ethan's stomach clenched. He kept his expression even, steady, not giving the cameras the explosion they craved. His hand shifted to the back of Liam's head, guiding it close as if whispering something fatherly. But what he heard wasn't fatherly joy. "Dad," Liam breathed, his voice so low only Ethan could catch it. His lips barely moved. "Mom's boyfriend made me clean his boots, or he wouldn't feed me." The words landed like shrapnel. Ethan's training kicked in again, forcing him to keep his face calm. But inside, fury burned cold and sharp. His boy, his son, had been starved as punishment. The gym didn't know. They just saw the soldiers return, the touching reunion. But on the first row of bleachers, Marissa, Ethan's ex-wife, didn't know. Her lips curled into something caught between a smirk and a sneer. She rose, her coat swinging neatly around her legs, and stepped forward with deliberate confidence. "You show up for applause," she said, loud enough for the nearest phones to capture, "and then disappear for months. You're a worthless soldier." Gasps rippled through the bleachers. A few phones zoomed in. The insult had landed exactly as she wanted, public, humiliating, on record. But Ethan didn't rise. He didn't shout back or lash out. His jaw tightened once, then settled. He lowered Liam to the ground, still keeping one protective hand on his shoulder. "We're going to the nurse," Ethan said, his voice low and firm. Not for the crowd, just for his son. The band's trumpets faltered into silence, the conductor lowering his baton. Teachers exchanged wary looks. Ms. Alvarez, Liam's homeroom teacher, stepped down from the bleachers, her concern written all over her face. And Liam? He clung to Ethan's sleeve, eyes darting nervously toward the gym doors, as if terrified that someone, maybe Troy, maybe Marissa, would yank him away before he could escape. Ethan bent just enough to meet his son's eyes. "I've got you," he whispered. And with that, father and son walked out of the gym, the roaring crowd falling into uneasy silence behind them. Nobody cheered anymore. Phones still filmed, but what they captured wasn't the viral moment Marissa wanted. It was something far more unsettling. A soldier carrying not just the weight of his country, but the bruises of his child. And under his breath, Ethan's mind repeated a single vow. They had no idea what I'd do next. The hallway outside the gym buzzed with half-muted whispers. Students craned their necks, teachers hushed them, and a few phones still lingered in the air, trying to catch another glimpse. Ethan walked with his hand firm on Liam's shoulder, guiding him through the crowd like he would through a battlefield, steady, protective, eyes locked forward. They turned into the school nurse's office. The door clicked shut, shutting out the echoes of the gym. The small room smelled faintly of sanitizer and grape hand soap. Motivational posters decorated the walls. Stay strong. You're braver than you think. A cot with stiff sheets sat against one wall, a counter lined with gauze and bandages against another. Sit down here, sweetheart, the nurse said gently, pulling out a stool. Her name badge read Karen Holt, but her tone was soft, motherly. Liam obeyed, sliding onto the stool, but he sat stiff, hands folded tight in his lap. His hoodie still covered his arms, pulled down like a shield. Can I take a quick look? Karen asked, her voice careful, asking permission rather than demanding. Liam's eyes darted to Ethan first. Ethan crouched, so they were eye level. It's okay, buddy. She's here to help. Slowly, Liam tugged the sleeves up. Karen's face remained composed, but her eyes flickered, catching the bruises, dark ovals on the biceps, a faded handprint along the ribs. She touched the edge of one mark with a gloved fingertip, and Liam winced. Did this happen from fall? She asked softly. No, Liam whispered. His gaze sank to the floor. Ethan clenched his jaw, but didn't interrupt. Karen jotted notes quickly, snapping photos with the school-issued tablet. We'll need to document this, she explained, more to Ethan than to Liam. For his safety. From the doorway, a familiar voice added, he can have these anytime. Miss Sophia Alvarez, Liam's teacher, stepped inside, placing 2 granola bars on the counter. She gave Liam a kind smile, but her eyes brimmed with worry. We keep snacks in the classroom pantry. No one should ever go hungry at school. Liam looked at the bars, then at Troy, who had leaned casually in the doorway like he owned the room. Marissa hovered behind him, phone in hand, thumbs darting across the screen. He's not starving, Troy said lightly. He just needs discipline. Structure. Back when I wrestled, you didn't make weight, you skipped dessert. Same thing here. Karen's brows furrowed. Skipping dessert is not the same as withholding meals. Troy smirked. Boots rooms then food. Teaches him respect. Liam's lips moved automatically, like the phrase was stitched into him. Boots rooms then food. Ethan's hand flexed against his knee. He wanted to snap, to throw Troy against the wall, but every muscle in his body reminded him. Not here, not now. He met Karen's gaze. She saw it too. The soldier steadying himself like a coiled spring refusing to snap. Marissa finally spoke, sharp and dismissive. Don't interrogate my boyfriend. At least he's around. Unlike some people. Her eyes cut to Ethan. You think you can waltz in for a parade and pretend you know how to raise a child? Ethan didn't answer her. His focus stayed on Liam, who hadn't moved, hadn't touched the granola bars, as though invisible chains bound his hands. The school resource officer entered. Officer Daniels, tall, gray at the temples, clipboard in hand. We'll need statements, he said calmly. He looked at Liam first. Son, do you feel safe at home? Liam froze. His throat bobbed, but no words came out. His eyes flicked toward Troy, then back to the floor. Daniel sighed, professional but weary. We'll file the report. For now, everyone should cool off. He left it at that, already writing notes. Karen handed Ethan a copy of her documentation. This will go into his record, she whispered. Ethan nodded once, sliding the paper into his pocket. Inside, his anger had settled into something colder, like steel being tempered. He wasn't going to explode. He was going to build a case. He placed a steady hand on Liam's shoulder again. We're leaving, he said, voice quiet but firm. Marissa scoffed. Good. Bring your checkbook. Ethan didn't flinch. He guided Liam out of the nurse's office, every step deliberate. Troy's smirk followed him like a shadow. But inside Ethan's pocket, another shadow stirred. The old phone he had hidden in Liam's backpack months ago, its memory packed with recordings. Evidence waiting to be heard. And tonight, he would decide how to use it. The hallway outside the nurse's office felt colder than the gym, as if the building itself had heard too much. The sound of sneakers squeaking on polished linoleum echoed sharp and lonely. Ethan walked with Liam pressed close to his side, his hand steady on the boy's shoulder. Behind them, Marissa's heels clicked in impatient rhythm. Troy followed, arms crossed. A smug grin etched across his face like he was daring Ethan to snap. Students and staff parted as the group passed, whispers rippling in their wake. They stepped into the afternoon light, filtering through the school's front doors. The parking lot hummed with distant car engines and chatter from kids being picked up. Ethan opened the truck door and guided Liam inside, buckling him in with careful precision. Liam didn't resist, but his eyes stayed fixed on his hands folded in his lap. Ethan closed the door gently and turned. Marissa was already at his shoulder, phone raised like a shield. "You think you can swoop in for one day and play hero?" she hissed. "Parenting doesn't work like that, Ethan. It's day in, day out. You're never here." Ethan kept his face calm. "He's got bruises. That's not parenting." Marissa's jaw tightened. "He needs discipline, structure." Troy's the only one stepping up. Troy leaned casually against Marissa's car, arms folded, voice dripping with arrogance. "Kid's soft. Crybaby soft. I'm toughening him up. You of all people should appreciate that, soldier." Ethan inhaled slowly through his nose, steadying himself. This was exactly what they wanted, a scene, a flash of temper, something to twist later. He let the silence stretch instead. Finally, he pulled his phone from his pocket, pretending to check a message. But beneath that gesture, his fingers brushed something else, the second device. The old phone. Months ago, during his last short visit home, Ethan had slipped it into Liam's backpack. The voice memo app had been set to start recording the moment the zipper closed. One-party consent laws meant those recordings were legal, and in the hands of the right people, devastating. He hadn't listened to them until this week, when Ms. Alvarez's message reached him overseas. Liam's losing weight. Something isn't right. Ethan had opened the first file on a crackling line in a military outpost. He'd heard the scrape of a shoe brush, a muffled sniffle, and Troy's voice commanding, "Say thank you, or no dinner." That was when Ethan began planning. Not rage, not fists planning. Now, standing in the school parking lot, he scrolled his main phone casually and typed a single word to Deputy Nora James, an old friend from town and now a deputy sheriff. Now. Marissa narrowed her eyes. "Who are you texting?" Ethan slid the phone back into his pocket. "You'll see." Liam glanced up from the passenger seat, worry flickering in his gaze. Ethan crouched beside the open door, lowering his voice so only Liam could hear. "I've got you," he whispered. "You don't have to be scared anymore." For the first time that day, Liam's small shoulders eased, just a fraction, but enough for Ethan to see. He closed the door softly and stood. Marissa folded her arms, her smirk faltering when she realized Ethan wasn't rising to her bait. Troy spat on the ground near Ethan's boots, a deliberate provocation. But Ethan only looked at him once, then climbed into the driver's seat. The engine rumbled to life. As they pulled out of the lot, Liam pressed his forehead against the window, watching the school shrink behind them. Ethan kept one hand on the wheel, the other tapping lightly on the old phone resting between them. Every second of humiliation, every threat, every withheld meal, it was all inside that device. And soon, the right ears would hear it. Ethan glanced at his son. "We're going home," he said, "but not the way they think." Liam blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" Ethan's eyes stayed on the road, but his voice carried the weight of steel. "It means tonight, the truth comes out." The drive to Marissa's townhouse felt longer than it was. Liam stayed quiet in the passenger seat, forehead pressed against the window, eyes tracking the blur of houses and trees. Ethan kept glancing at him, his knuckles tight on the steering wheel, but he didn't press for conversation. He knew his son was saving words for when he felt safe enough to use them. When they pulled into the narrow driveway, Marissa's car was already parked out front. The beige siding of the townhouse gleamed unnaturally, as though it had been scrubbed too often. Ethan killed the engine, stepped out, and came around to open Liam's door. The boy hesitated before stepping down, glancing at the house like it was a fortress that had trapped him too many times. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, strong, artificial, almost choking. The living room was neat in the way of a stage photograph. Magazines stacked, pillows perfectly fluffed, a vase of fake flowers on the mantel. But under the surface, Ethan noticed the little signs of tension: scuffed baseboards, a dent in the wall near the staircase, a shoe mat stained dark. And on that mat sat a pair of boots. Black leather, scuffed but polished to a shine, so bright the lamp overhead reflected in them. Ethan froze for half a second, his eyes narrowing. He had seen boots like these before, years ago. Something about the angle of the creases, the curve of the sole, tugged at a memory he couldn't quite place. Liam's gaze locked on them immediately. His small body stiffened, as if the sight alone pulled him back into some ritual of fear. Troy noticed. He grinned and tapped one of the boots with the toe of his sneaker. "Respect starts with shine," he said, eyes flicking to Ethan. "Right, soldier?" Ethan didn't answer. His jaw clenched, but his voice stayed calm. "Liam, go sit down." The boy obeyed, perching at the edge of the couch like someone braced for an order. His hands folded on his lap, his back straight, his eyes fixed on those boots. Marissa dropped her purse on the counter and turned, her phone landing face down on the coffee table with a soft thud. Her fingers still hovered over it, restless, like she couldn't stop touching the screen. "Let's talk like adults," she said. "You want more time with Liam? Fine, but you're gonna have to contribute more. Prices are insane. Groceries alone are eating me alive. $200 right now would be a start. I'm current on child support," Ethan said, his voice measured. "You know that. Court ledgers don't feed a growing boy." Marissa shot back, her tone sharp but practiced, like she'd said it to herself in the mirror before. Troy leaned against the wall, arms crossed, smirk broadening. "Kid needs structure. Rules. Boots, rooms, then food. Simple." Liam's lips parted, repeating the words under his breath. Boots, rooms, then food. He didn't sound like he believed them. He sounded like he'd been trained to. Ethan's heart clenched, but his mind stayed sharp. He looked at Marissa, her restless fingers, her calculating eyes. Then at Troy, so comfortable in his arrogance, sure the soldier would lose his temper. Not this time. Ethan slid a hand into his pocket and felt the weight of the old phone. He pulled it out and set on the coffee table. "What's that?" Marissa asked, suspicion flickering across her face. "Something you should hear," Ethan said quietly. He pressed play. The room filled with the sound of a child's muffled sobs, the scrape of a brush against leather, the clink of eyelets. Marissa's voice followed, cold and efficient. "Faster, Liam. If those boots aren't done, you skip dinner." Then Troy's voice, mocking and cruel. "Say thank you, Troy. Or no food. And don't call that man Dad." He left. "I'm here. You understand?" The living room froze. The artificial lemon scent suddenly felt sour. Liam's hands trembled in his lap. Marissa's face drained of color. Troy's smirk cracked for the first time. Ethan sat back, calm as a man who had waited for this moment. His voice was steady, almost quiet. "That's not structure. That's abuse." Before Marissa could respond, a firm knock rattled the front door. Troy stiffened. Marissa's eyes darted to her phone. Liam's head snapped up in surprise. Ethan didn't move. He just looked at the door and said, "That'll be for you." The knock came again, harder this time, followed by the sound of a voice, firm, professional. "Sheriff's Department. Open up." The knock rattled the air again, sharper this time. "Sheriff's Department. Open the door." Marissa's face went pale, her hand twitching toward the phone she'd left on the coffee table. Troy straightened, his arms unfolding from his chest, his cocky grin sliding into something colder. Liam froze on the couch, eyes wide, shoulders trembling as though the sound alone carried danger. Ethan didn't rise. He stayed seated, calm, his hand resting on his knee. "Answer it," he said evenly. Marissa spun toward him. "What did you do?" "Answer it," he repeated. Her mouth tightened into a thin line, but the knock came again, harder, more commanding. With a shaky exhale, she moved to the door and pulled it open. Deputy Nora James stepped inside, her uniform neat, her voice clipped and steady. Behind her followed 2 patrol officers and a woman in a gray cardigan with a clipboard tucked under her arm. The air shifted instantly. Authority had entered the room. "Marissa Hart?" Nora asked, her eyes sharp. Marissa nodded stiffly. "Yes, that's me. What's this about?" "We're here on a welfare check for Liam Cole," Nora said, her gaze flicking past Marissa to where the boy sat on the couch. "We'll need to speak with him privately." The woman with the clipboard smiled gently at Liam. "Hi, I'm Kara Patel with Child Protective Services. Would you like to come with me for a minute?" Liam's eyes darted to Ethan first, waiting. Ethan gave a single nod. "Go ahead, buddy. It's okay." Kara extended a hand, and slowly, cautiously, Liam slid off the couch and walked toward her. She guided him into the hallway, her voice soft and low, easing him away from the storm. As soon as the boy was out of sight, Troy scoffed. "This is ridiculous. He's fine. Kid just needs tough love." Deputy Nora's gaze locked on him, cold and direct. "And you are?" "Troy Miller," he said, puffing out his chest. Nora's brows flicked up. "Probation for misdemeanor assault. Isn't that right?" The smirk faltered. "That's got nothing to do with this." "It has everything to do with this," she shot back. She nodded to the officers, who shifted subtly closer, their presence heavy in the room. Marissa's voice cracked in frustration. "This is harassment. Ethan put you up to this. He's trying to steal Liam from me." Ethan finally stood. He moved slowly, deliberately, not raising his voice. "No, Marissa, I'm trying to protect him from you. From him." He jerked his chin toward Troy. Nora gestured to the coffee table. "Is that the device?" Ethan picked up the old phone and handed it to her. Recordings from his backpack. Months of them. Nora played a clip, the same one Ethan had shown moments before. The sound of Liam's sobs filled the room again, followed by Troy's cruel demand. "Say thank you, Troy. Or no food." One of the patrol officers' jaws tightened. Even hardened men shifted uncomfortably at the sound of a child being broken down. Troy's bravado cracked. "That's taken out of context." "There's no context that justifies starving a child." Nora cut him off. Her voice was ice. Marissa's hand flew to her hair, pulling it back, eyes frantic. "I didn't. It wasn't supposed to." "You enabled it," Ethan said, his voice calm but cutting. "You let him. You stood there and said nothing while our son was treated like dirt." For once, Marissa had no quick retort. From a hallway, Kara returned with Liam, her hand lightly on his shoulder. "He confirmed what's on the recordings," she said quietly. "He also mentioned being told not to call his father Dad. That's significant." Nora reached into her folder and placed a stack of papers on the table. "By order of the court, Liam is to be placed in temporary custody with his father pending further investigation. Effective immediately." Marissa gasped. "You can't do this. He belongs with me." Nora's eyes didn't waver. "No, Marissa. He belongs where he's safe." Liam moved quickly to Ethan's side, gripping his sleeve like it was the only solid thing in the room. Ethan rested a steady hand on his son's back, keeping his own composure even as relief surged through him. Troy stepped forward, his anger boiling over. "You think you've won? This is temporary. Judges don't take kids from their moms that easy." Nora raised a brow. "Tell that to the probation officer who'll be hearing about this tonight." The room buzzed with quiet, heavy tension. Marissa stood frozen, her world crumbling. Troy seethed, jaw clenched, calculating his next move. Ethan stayed rooted, unshaken, his focus only on the boy by his side. And beneath it all, the boots still sat by the door, polished and waiting, silent witnesses to everything that had been done. The room went still after Nora's words. Temporary custody with his father. Effective immediately. For a heartbeat. Only Liam's quiet breathing filled the air, shallow and quick against Ethan's sleeve. Marissa's lips parted in disbelief, her hands trembling over the edge of the coffee table. Troy's chest rose and fell like a man trying to keep a lid on a boiling pot. Then the lid blew. "This is a joke," Troy roared, his face flushing red. He stepped toward Ethan, jabbing a finger. "You think you can just walk in here after months away, after leaving this kid behind, and suddenly play hero? He's soft because of you. Worthless because of you. You're not even a real dad. You're just a uniform." The words hung heavy in the air. Marissa flinched, but she didn't intervene. She stared at Ethan, searching for the explosion she wanted, the blow-up that would prove her right. But Ethan didn't move. His grip on Liam's shoulder remained steady, his eyes locked on Troy with a calm that rattled more than fury could. A real father, Ethan said softly, feeds his son, protects his son, doesn't starve him to feel powerful. Deputy Nora raised a hand. Mr. Miller stepped back. But Troy didn't. He sneered, reaching for the boots by the door. With a violent kick, he sent one skidding across the hardwood. It hit the wall with a dull thud. Something small clinked out from inside and rolled across the floor, metal against wood. The patrol officer closest to the door bent down, picking it up. A dog tag, scuffed, the letters worn but legible. He handed it to Nora, who read aloud, Cole, Ethan J. Her eyes snapped to Ethan. Ethan's stomach twisted. He reached out, taking the tag in his hand, rubbing his thumb over the stamped letters he knew by heart. His own name. His own tag. The boots weren't just props for abuse. They were his. For a moment, the room blurred around him. Dusty footlockers, deployments, the quiet ritual of stowing away what mattered. He had kept those boots and tags in storage. Part of the life he carried even when away. He had locked them up, safe. Or so he thought. How did you get these? Ethan's voice was low, dangerous, but still controlled. Troy's smirk faltered. He looked at Marissa. Marissa's face drained of color. She stammered, glancing at Nora, at the officers, at Ethan. We needed money. The unit, it was just sitting there. He pawned some things. You didn't think using my gear to break our son would matter? Ethan cut in, voice calm but sharp as glass. Nora's jaw tightened. So, this isn't just abuse. We're looking at theft, possession of stolen property, and violation of probation conditions. She signaled to the officers. Detain him. One of the patrolmen stepped forward, pulling Troy's arms behind his back. He struggled, cursing, his voice breaking with rage. This isn't over. Judges don't side with ghosts like him. You'll see. You'll all see. The cuffs clicked shut. The sound was final, echoing louder than his shouting. Marissa collapsed onto the couch, her head in her hands. I just thought. He said it would help us. He said he knew how to handle Liam. Her words fell apart into a broken whisper. Ethan didn't move toward her. His focus stayed on Liam, who hadn't taken his eyes off the boots. The boy's breathing hitched, shallow and fast, as if expecting someone to order him to start polishing, to earn dinner. Ethan crouched in front of him. You don't ever have to touch those again, he said gently. Not ever. Liam's eyes lifted, hesitant, searching his father's face. For the first time, he nodded. A small, fragile nod. Nora gathered the papers from the table. Mr. Cole, you have temporary custody effective immediately. We'll coordinate a hearing in 72 hours. She glanced at Marissa, her voice firm. Until then, Liam remains with his father. Marissa lifted her head, tears streaking down her cheeks. Ethan, please. Don't take him from me. Ethan stood, his voice quiet but steady. I'm not taking him. You gave him away the moment you let this happen. He reached for Liam's hand. The boy slid off the couch, clutching it tightly. Together, they walked toward the door, past the boots, past the chaos, past the woman who had once been wife and mother but now sat hollow in her choices. And as the door shut behind them, Ethan's mind locked on one thought. They thought they'd broken with my boots. They had no idea what I'd do next. The cold night air wrapped around them as Ethan stepped off the porch with Liam's hand clutched in his. The chaos of the living room, the shouting, the clink of handcuffs, Marissa's broken sobs, faded the moment the front door closed. Out here, the world seemed almost too quiet. Ethan guided Liam toward his truck parked at the curb. The boy's grip was tight, knuckles pale, as though letting go might pull him back into the house he dreaded. Ethan opened the passenger door and helped him climb in. He buckled the seatbelt himself, tugging it snug, like he used to when Liam was small. For a moment, Ethan just stood there, watching his son. The boy's face looked older than 11, shadowed by things he should never have carried. His eyes lingered on the house, wide and wary, as if expecting Troy to burst through the door, even with cuffs on. You're safe now, Ethan said, steady. He closed the door and climbed into the driver's side. The truck rumbled to life. As Ethan pulled away, Liam finally spoke, his voice small but sharp enough to cut through the silence. Are they going to hurt me for this? Ethan's heart twisted. He gripped the wheel tighter, but kept his voice calm. No, son. They can't touch you anymore. Liam shook his head. They always said if I told anyone, it would get worse. They said you'd never believe me. Ethan glanced over. His boy stared out the window, jaw tight. Ethan's chest ached, but he forced his voice steady. I believe you, Liam. I always will. The boy turned his head slightly, just enough for Ethan to see tears catch the dim streetlight. He didn't wipe them away. They drove in silence until Ethan pulled into a gas station. He parked near the fluorescent lights and stepped out. When he opened the passenger side, Liam looked confused. We're getting food, Ethan said simply. Real food. Inside the small convenience store, Ethan grabbed bottled water, sandwiches, chips, and a chocolate bar. Liam hovered at his side, hesitant, eyes darting as though someone might stop him. When Ethan set the chocolate on the counter, Liam whispered, "Am I allowed to have that?" Ethan crouched to meet his eyes. "You don't need permission to eat, son. Not from anyone. Not ever again." Liam blinked, uncertain, then nodded. His hands trembled as he carried the chocolate out to the truck, clutching it like treasure. Back in the driver's seat, Ethan watched him unwrap the bar carefully, slowly breaking off a piece. He held it for a second, waiting. When Ethan gave him a nod, Liam finally placed it in his mouth. His eyes closed as if the sweetness itself was freedom. But peace didn't last long. Ethan's phone buzzed on the console. A message from Nora. "We've got a problem. Marissa's already calling lawyers. She's claiming you staged the recordings. Be ready for a fight." Ethan's jaw tightened. He'd expected this. Marissa wasn't the type to fold, not even under the weight of her own mistakes. She would drag him through the courts, twist every detail, paint him as the absent soldier who had no right to raise a child. "Dad!" Liam's voice was small, cautious. Ethan turned. "Yeah, buddy. What happens now?" Ethan exhaled slowly, reaching over to squeeze his son's shoulder. "Now we fight smart. Together." Liam nodded, though fear still lingered in his eyes. He leaned against the seat, clutching the empty chocolate wrapper. As the truck pulled back onto the road, Ethan's thoughts sharpened. Tonight wasn't victory. It was only the beginning. Marissa would fight, Troy would scheme, and the truth about the boots had only started to unravel. But Ethan wasn't afraid. For the first time in years, his mission was clear. Protect Liam, no matter the cost. Morning came too early. Ethan hadn't slept much. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Liam's bruises, heard Troy's mocking voice, smelled the lemon cleaner that had masked rot. His son had fallen asleep on the couch in Ethan's small apartment, finally breathing evenly, an empty sandwich wrapper still on the coffee table beside him. Ethan moved quietly, careful not to wake him. His phone buzzed. A message from Deputy Nora. "Meet me at the station. Bring coffee." By the time Ethan arrived, Nora was already hunched over her desk, uniform crisp, hair pulled into a tight bun. She accepted the cup with a nod and slid a folder across the table. "Pawn records," she said. Guess whose name popped up? Ethan opened the folder. There was in black and white, Marissa Hart, signature on a pawn slip, dated 3 months earlier. The item list hit like a punch. Military boots, uniforms, a bundle of dog tags, medals. His medals. A grainy photo showed Troy hauling a Foot Locker into the shop's back door. Marissa's car license plate was visible in the corner of the frame. Ethan's stomach turned cold. "They took my unit." Nora leaned back in her chair. "Looks like it. Shop still has surveillance footage. Want to see?" Minutes later, they watched the video. Ethan saw Marissa glance nervously at the camera as she signed, her eyes flicking to Troy like she wanted him to hurry. Troy looked smug, like he'd found treasure. The owner had scanned their IDs, following the law. The evidence was airtight. Nora folded her arms. Not just abuse anymore. Theft, fraud, and for Miller, clear probation violation. Judges don't like when kids are involved, especially not with military property. Ethan rubbed his temples. They made him polish my boots. They told him I wasn't his father. They broke him with my things. Nora's voice softened. That's why we get it all on record. We'll have CPS, the nurse's photos, Alvarez's testimony, and now theft charges. It's building strong. Still, Ethan's chest felt heavy. He thought of Liam's whisper. "They said you'd never believe me." And how right the boy had been, because without proof, who would? Nora slid a second paper across the table. Emergency custody holds for 72 hours. Hearing in 3 days. That's our window. But be ready. Marissa already hired a family lawyer. They'll paint you as the absent soldier. Ethan nodded grimly. He'd seen battles lost by hesitation. He wouldn't make that mistake again. Back at the apartment, Liam stirred awake, blinking against the morning light. Ethan handed him a glass of milk and sat beside him. "Buddy," he said, "I need to ask you something important. When they made you clean the boots, did they ever say whose they were?" Liam frowned, thinking, "They said they were better than yours. But they had your name inside. I saw the letters." He looked up, eyes wide. "Were they yours, Dad?" Ethan's throat tightened. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, they were." Liam's face crumpled with confusion and anger. Why would Mom? Why would she let him? Ethan pulled him close. "Because she made bad choices. But you don't carry those choices. You hear me? None of this is your fault." Liam buried his face in his father's chest, his small hands gripping Ethan's shirt. Ethan closed his eyes, steadying his breathing. The evidence was stacking, the truth unraveling piece by piece. But he knew Marissa wouldn't back down. She would twist everything until the last possible moment. As he held his son, Ethan thought of the dog tag clinking out of the boot, his own name staring back at him from the floor of that house. A piece of him had been stolen, pawned, and weaponized against the boy he loved most. And now, with 3 days until the hearing, he had to decide how to use that truth. The courthouse clock ticked toward noon when Ethan stepped outside with Liam. The morning had been a blur of paperwork, CPS interviews, affidavits, signatures. Nora had been by his side the whole time, firm and professional. But the moment Ethan and Liam hit the street, the war shifted. Across the plaza, Marissa was waiting. Her coat flared in the breeze, phone pressed to her ear, a man in a suit standing beside her with a briefcase. The lawyer. She spotted Ethan and didn't hesitate. "You're not keeping him," she snapped, voice sharp enough to draw stares for passers-by. "Do you think some sloppy recordings and pity looks are enough? You've been gone half his life. A soldier who abandons his family. What kind of father is that?" Liam flinched at the volume. Ethan tightened his grip on his son's shoulder. "Keep your voice down," he said evenly. But Marissa didn't. She wanted the crowd. "You think this makes you a hero? No, you're using him to look good. That's all you've ever done. Show up when it suits you, then disappear." The lawyer leaned toward her, murmuring something, but Marissa yanked her arm away. "No, I want to hear it. Liam deserves to know who his father really is." Her eyes locked on the boy. "He left us, Liam. He chose a uniform over you. Troy was the one who stayed." Liam's chest rose quickly, tears threatening his eyes. He glanced up at Ethan, searching for something, confirmation, denial, anything. Ethan crouched in front of him, shutting out the noise around them. "Listen to me," he said softly. "I didn't leave because I wanted to. I served so you can live free. Every day I was gone, I counted the days until I came home to you. That's the truth." Liam's lip trembled, but he nodded. He leaned into Ethan's chest, clinging tighter. Marissa's face hardened, frustration etched deep. She turned back to her lawyer. "File everything. I want him buried in court." The man adjusted his tie, his expression neutral. "We'll argue absence, lack of stability, and emotional manipulation. Custody courts lean maternal, especially with military parents." Nora stepped out from the courthouse doors just in time to hear. "They also lean on evidence," she said coolly. "And we've got plenty." Marissa's eyes flashed. "You think some bruises mean I lose my son? Kids fall. Teachers exaggerate. Ethan staged those recordings. Anyone could fake audio. Except the timestamps match school hours," Nora countered. "And the nurse's photos don't lie. Neither does a pawn slip with your signature." For the first time, Marissa faltered. Her lawyer stepped between them. "Enough. This isn't the place." Ethan straightened, keeping his son close. His voice was steady, but there was an edge now. "Marissa, you're digging deeper. You think you're protecting yourself, but all you're doing is proving Liam doesn't come first." Her jaw clenched. For a moment, something flickered in her expression. Guilt, maybe, or fear, but then it hardened again. She turned sharply, storming off across the plaza, her lawyer following. Liam let out a shaky breath. "She hates you," he whispered. Ethan shook his head. "She doesn't hate me. She hates herself. And right now, she's trying to make me carry that." He cupped the boy's chin gently. "But we don't carry her choices. Only ours." They started toward the truck. The day felt heavy, the fight far from over. Ethan could already see the shape of the battlefield, courtrooms, custody hearings, endless paperwork. But he also knew something Marissa didn't. The boots and the dog tags weren't just evidence of theft. They were proof of intent, of humiliation weaponized against a child. And once that truth came out, no lawyer in the world could cover it. Still, the road to that moment would be long. Ethan tightened his grip on Liam's shoulder as they walked. "You're safe," he repeated quietly, "no matter what happens next." And in that moment, he meant it more than he had ever meant anything in his life. 3 days later, the courthouse hallways pulsed with footsteps and murmurs. Suits brushed past uniforms, heels clicked against polished tile, and the smell of old wood and coffee hung in the air. Ethan sat at the long table, Liam beside him, Nora on the other side, her files stacked high like weapons laid out for battle. Across from them sat Marissa and her lawyer, a tall man with slicked back hair and an expression that never cracked. Marissa's face was pale, but her eyes darted constantly toward Ethan, daring him to lose composure. Troy was absent, still sitting in county lockup, but his shadow clung to the proceedings. The judge entered, robes swishing, and the room fell silent. She settled behind the bench, her eyes scanning the case file. "This is a custody review for Liam Cole," she announced. "I have read the preliminary reports. I will now hear arguments." Marissa's lawyer rose smoothly. "Your Honor, my client has been the primary caregiver. Mr. Cole has spent most of the last 5 years overseas. He is absent, unstable, and unfamiliar with his son's daily needs. My client admits mistakes were made with her partner, but that does not negate her role as the consistent parent. Uprooting Liam now would do more harm than good." Marissa nodded along. Her chin lifted as though the words absolved her. Then Nora stood. "Your Honor, we're not dealing with mistakes. We're dealing with systemic neglect and abuse." She laid down photos, Liam's bruises documented by the nurse. Next, her reports. Ms. Alvarez's testimony, Kara Patel's notes, Officer Danielle's statements. Finally, she slid forward the pawn slip with Marissa's signature. "Not only was the child starved and coerced," Nora continued, "he was forced to polish military boots that belonged to his own father, boots pawned illegally by Ms. Hart and her partner. The abuse was deliberate, symbolic, and cruel." A ripple went through the courtroom. The judge leaned forward. "Military property?" Ethan finally spoke, his voice calm but resonant. "Yes, Your Honor. Those boots and the dog tags inside them were mine. My son was made to erase me with my own belongings." For the first time, Marissa's composure cracked. I didn't know he kept the tags in there," she stammered. We needed money." Her lawyer cut in sharply. "Your Honor, even if true, this is irrelevant to custody. At worst, it is a theft matter, not a parenting one." Nora's eyes flashed. "With respect, forcing a child to clean boots under threat of starvation is absolutely a parenting matter." The judge tapped her pen thoughtfully. "Mr. Cole, do you have the recordings?" Ethan slid the phone forward. "Yes, Your Honor. Directly from my son's backpack." The bailiff connected it to the speaker. The courtroom filled with Liam's small sobs, the scrape of a brush, Troy's voice sneering. "Say thank you, or no dinner." Then Marissa's voice cold. "Faster, Liam. He works all day. If those boots aren't done, you skip dinner." The sound chilled the room. Even the stenographer paused, her fingers hovering over the keys. The judge's eyes hardened. "That will do." Liam squeezed Ethan's hand under the table, his eyes wet but steady. He whispered, "It's out now." Ethan nodded. Marissa's lawyer scrambled. "Your Honor, my client regrets those words. Stress, financial strain." The judge cut him off with a sharp glance. "Stress does not excuse abuse. This court exists to protect the child, not the pride of the parents." Silence fell heavy. For the first time since it all began, Ethan felt the balance shift. Not just on paper, but in the air itself. The hearing wasn't over, but the truth had landed, undeniable and raw. And yet Ethan knew the final blow hadn't fallen. The biggest truth was still waiting to surface. The courtroom air felt charged, as though everyone was holding their breath. The recordings had left the gallery silent, the sound of a boy's sobs echoing long after the playback ended. Ethan sat still, his hand wrapped around Liam's, but inside his chest, his pulse hammered like a drum. The judge leaned forward, her pen resting against the file. I've heard enough to establish neglect and emotional abuse. But there's a larger matter here. Ms. Hart, I need you to explain this pawn slip. Marissa's face flushed crimson. Her lawyer whispered urgently, but she shook her head and rose to her feet. Yes, I signed it, she admitted, voice trembling. We needed money. Bills were piling up. Ethan sends checks, but it's not enough. And Troy said, he said there was no harm in pawning things Ethan wasn't even using. The judge's expression darkened. Military property is not trinkets, and using those items to punish a child is reprehensible. Marissa's shoulders sagged. I didn't mean for her to go that far. Her voice cracked, almost a plea. I didn't know Troy would twist it. Ethan spoke for the first time since the playback, his voice even but heavy with weight. He didn't twist it, Marissa. He built it. He made our son polish my boots because he knew it would erase me piece by piece. He turned slightly toward the judge. It wasn't just punishment. It was humiliation. Every time Liam bent over those boots, he was being told I was nothing. The gallery stirred, whispers rippling through the benches. Nora rose, placing another document on the judge's desk. Your Honor, we pulled surveillance footage from the pawn shop. It shows Ms. Hart and Mr. Miller unloading a footlocker. Inside were not only boots and tags, but service medals and personal letters. Items of deep sentimental and symbolic value. She clicked a remote, and the footage appeared on the screen behind the judge. Grainy but clear enough. Marissa glancing nervously over her shoulder while Troy hefted the footlocker. Marissa signing the slip. The date stamp glowed in the corner. Just 2 days after Ethan's last overseas deposit cleared. The room shifted. Suddenly, the pieces fit. The insult at the homecoming, the baiting words worthless soldier, the boots on the mat. The twist landed heavy. Marissa hadn't just enabled Troy. Together, they had stolen Ethan's history, pawned it for cash, and then used it to break Liam. The abuse hadn't been random cruelty, it was calculated erasure. The judge's voice cut through the murmurs. Ms. Hart, you not only neglected your child, you weaponized his father's identity against him. Do you understand the magnitude of what you've done? Marissa's eyes filled with tears. She sank back in her chair, burying her face in her hands. The lawyer tried to recover, rising with forced composure. Your Honor, my client was manipulated by Mr. Miller. She regrets her choices deeply. We asked the court to consider her history as Liam's primary caregiver. But the judge wasn't swayed. She turned to Ethan. Mr. Cole, do you have anything further to add? Ethan stood slowly, Liam's hand still in his. His voice was steady, clear. Only this. My son deserves to grow up knowing he is loved, not punished. He deserves to eat without fear. He deserves to call me dad without being told it's wrong. His eyes flicked to Marissa, and he deserves a mother who chooses him over her pride. Silence fell again. The judge tapped her pen once, then set it down. This court will recess for deliberation, she announced. But I assure all parties, this case will not be treated lightly. The gavel struck, echoing like thunder. Ethan sat back down, exhaling slowly. Liam leaned against him, whispering so only his father could hear. It's almost over, right? Ethan squeezed his hand. Almost, buddy. Almost. But inside, he knew the final decision hadn't yet been spoken. The last wave still had a break. The courtroom buzzed with low voices as everyone waited for the judge to return. Liam sat pressed against Ethan's side, his small hand clutching his father's sleeve like a lifeline. Ethan rubbed his thumb over the boy's knuckles, steady and reassuring, though inside, his stomach was a knot of tension. When the judge re-entered, silence fell instantly. She adjusted her glasses, glanced over the notes, and spoke. This court has reviewed the evidence. the testimony, and the recordings. The conclusion is clear. The child, Liam Cole, was subjected to repeated emotional and physical abuse under the supervision of Ms. Hart and her partner, Mr. Miller. Marissa's head dropped into her hands. The judge's voice carried no hesitation. Effective immediately, full custody is granted to Mr. Cole. Ms. Hart's visitation rights are suspended until she completes parental counseling and the court reviews progress. Mr. Miller remains in custody on probation violations and charges of child endangerment. This court is adjourned. The gavel struck. Ethan exhaled, a sound more like a release than a breath. Liam leaned into him, whispering, "We did it, Dad." Ethan kissed the top of his son's head, his throat tightening. "We did it, buddy. We really did." Across the room, Marissa sobbed openly. She tried to rise, reaching toward them. "Ethan, please. Don't take him away. I can change. I swear I can." Ethan turned, his expression solemn but calm. "This isn't about me taking him. It's about you losing him. You made those choices. You let him suffer." Her cries filled the chamber, but Ethan didn't falter. He walked out with Liam, leaving the sound of her regret behind. Outside, the late afternoon sun painted the courthouse steps in gold. Reporters lingered at the base, cameras ready, but Ethan shielded Liam, keeping his pace steady. He wasn't here for a story. He was here for his son. They reached the truck. Ethan opened the door, and Liam climbed in without hesitation. For once, there was no nervous glance back, no fear of being pulled away. On the drive home, Liam broke the silence. "When I was polishing those boots, I thought maybe you'd forgotten me. That maybe Mom was right." Ethan's hands tightened on the wheel. He kept his voice steady. "I never forgot you. Not for 1 second. And I'll never let anyone make you feel that way again." Liam looked out the window, blinking hard. "Can I call you Dad again?" Out loud. Ethan's throat closed. He reached over, squeezing Liam's shoulder. "That's all I've ever wanted." The boy smiled, a small, fragile smile, but it carried something new. Hope. That evening, they sat together in Ethan's apartment. Liam ate scrambled eggs, toast, and a second slice of pie. No rules, no threats, no boots lined up by the door. Just food and quiet. After dinner, Liam pulled a folded napkin from his pocket. On it, he had scribbled stick figures, one tall, one small, walking away for a pair of boots left behind. He handed it to Ethan. "Can we put them away forever?" Ethan studied the drawing, his chest heavy with pride and sorrow. "Yeah," he said softly. "We'll put them away." Later, when Liam finally slept in his room, safe, belly full, a stuffed toy under his arm, Ethan stepped onto the balcony. The city lights glimmered, and for the first time in months, he let himself breathe fully. They had tried to erase him. They had tried to starve his son into silence. But the truth had cut through, sharper than any weapon. Ethan looked back at the closed door of his son's room, the faint sound of steady breathing inside. Mission complete, he thought. Not the kind from his deployments, but the only one that had ever truly mattered. And in that quiet moment, he vowed, no more battles would be fought in shadows. His son would grow knowing he was loved, believed, and never alone.